Two different people emailed me about werewolf sightings, and I didn't think anything of the first one, but when the second came in, I realized there might be something to this because both emails were from different people, but from the same area, which is London, Ohio, if you're familiar. I'm going to tell you Cody's story first because I feel like it builds for the second story, and the two stories might be related. Cody said I could use his real name. He didn't care to be tagged, but if you see a Cody in the comments, that's him. This story is actually Cody's father's. Cody's dad was an avid outdoorsman, fisherman. He was used to being alone in the woods for long stretches of time, and nothing really scared him except for when he told this story. Cody said he was not a man of hyperbole. He did not believe in the supernatural. He was scientific minded, except he could tell when he told this story that he believed it. The way that my phone just fell, but Cody's description of his father reminds me of my own father because he's very scientific minded, but he also has one story that he can't explain. I'll tell that some other time. Cody said 30 years ago, his dad went out fishing in the middle of the night on a large man-made lake near London, Ohio. Cody said he was out in the middle of the lake fishing near a spillway, which is a structure that allows excess water to flow around a dam. I had to look that up. And then there was a road. He's out there for a little while when he looks up near the spillway and he sees a large wolf-like creature standing on two legs staring at him. I don't know how far away he was, but he said for sure it was a wolf or a dog creature, but it was 7 feet tall when it stood on its hind legs. And it stood for long enough where Cody's dad knew that it wasn't a regular dog. And the way that this upright wolf creature was staring at him sunk his heart into his gut. He sat still for a few seconds. His heart was racing in his chest and he was watching it watch him. When he moved to get the boat closer, the wolf took off running on 4 legs. Apparently, this sighting freaked him out enough where he packed it up and he went home. He didn't tell anyone for years because he didn't want to be perceived as someone who's seeing cryptids in the middle of the night. Until one night, his sister, so Cody's aunt, comes home. She was out riding around with their friends in the woods, and she comes home and claims that she saw a wolf-like creature standing on 2 legs in the woods. She was also apparently near the lake when she saw it. So now it's common lore in Cody's family that both his father and his aunt have seen this same creature. And this leads me to my second story, which was sent in by a man named Paul. Paul sent this story in December. I was keeping it in my back pocket because, to be honest with you, I don't really believe in cryptids, or I didn't. But I also want to be fair and transparent because if I ever assume that I know everything, then I'm never learning. So I'm going to keep an open mind, and both of these stories make me think that maybe there's something I'm missing. Paul's story takes place in 2007. He was 19 at the time, and his aunt and uncle owned a cabin-like house where they had chickens and some other animals in London, Ohio, near a large man-made lake. I don't know if it's the same lake. I'm not familiar with the area, but the similarities in these two stories are striking to me. So Paul's aunt and uncle are taking this long-awaited vacation. Apparently they didn't have a ton of money, so they didn't travel much. And they asked Paul if he'll stay at their house and keep an eye on their chickens and their dogs. Paul was still living at home at the time with his parents, not too far from where his aunt and uncle lived, and he is excited to have a house to himself and to just feel like he's a bachelor. He also said that he had started seeing his girlfriend at the time, and he was excited to have some alone time with her. They're going on a cruise. The day they're leaving, Paul goes over there so they can give him instructions on how to take care of all the animals. This is my own little werewolf, Ozzy. I had to pick her up because she's bad and she was barking. His aunt gives him a rundown of how to properly take care of all of the animals, and before they leave, his uncle points to a drawer, opens it, and says, "There's a pew-pew in here. If you hear banging on the door, take it out and don't be afraid to use it." Paul's like, "What are you talking about? This is more than I signed up for." And his uncle says, "Yeah, there's an effing werewolf running around here." Paul's aunt rolls her eyes. She pulls him aside before they leave, and she says he had to pew-pew something that came to the door a few years ago, and he hasn't been right since. Paul said his uncle was like a backwoods type of man. He was a veteran, he drank a lot, he had severe PTSD from being in a few wars. He rambled often about government conspiracies, so Paul knew that he wasn't exactly a trustworthy source, and he just didn't believe that there was a werewolf living on their property. The first night Paul was there alone, nothing happened. He went to work, came home, went to bed. He wakes up in the morning, he takes care of the animals, he's off that day, so he invites the girl he's seeing to come stay the night with him at his aunt and uncle's house. They're Netflix and chilling in the bedroom, whatever. I don't know what streaming service was available in 2007, but they're in the bedroom, they're awake. There was only one single window in the bedroom, so Paul looks at the window and he sees a pair of eyes peering in. It's too dark for him to make any features, but he said they were glowing, not in like a yellow or a red way, but the way that a pair of animal eyes glow if light catches them. I know exactly what he's talking about. I have a cat named Pete who looks at me in the dark, and it's the same thing. If you have a cat, you've seen this. So Paul's like, "What the?" And he jumps up to scare the animal away, but as soon as he gets up from the bed, the animal runs off into the woods. He gets back in bed, and a few minutes later, they hear a loud banging at the front door. Paul said it sounded like a SWAT team was trying to break down the door. It was like bang, 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 and the door was wood, but there was a set of metal bars that Paul's uncle had installed on the exterior of the front door. He also clocked it at this point that there were also bars on all of the inside windows. Paul said it was not the wind, it was something trying to break the door down. The door was wooden, it was like bang, 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 and the door was splintering around the edges. The plaster at the hinges started cracking. Paul's girlfriend is screaming, freaking out at this point. He says, "You need to call 911. She calls 911 on her flip phone and she puts it on speakerphone. They're like, "Someone's trying to break into the house." And the 911 operator can hear the banging. She says, "Stay on the phone while we send dispatch." At this point, the door is visibly shaking, so Paul goes to the drawer where his uncle showed that object, and he takes it out because at this point he fully believes that this door is about to come down. He braces himself against the wall, aims at the door, and prepares for the door to come down. And then it stops. The 911 dispatcher's on the line, and she's like, "Are you still there? Are you okay?" And they're like, "It stopped." She said, "You know, the police are on their way. Just stay safe. Is there a way that you can protect yourself?" And they're just standing in the living room, breathing heavy, catching their breath in silence, when all of a sudden they see a dark, about 7-foot figure walk past the front window and look into the house. Paul said from the light of the living room he could see the features, and it stood about 7 feet tall. It had dog-like ears, pointy ears, a long snout, and it turned and looked in the living room. He said it was covered head to toe in fur, and when he made eye contact with it, it seemed to raise its eyebrow, which he noticed there was a scar. The scar was ugly and jagged, and there was no fur growing where the scar was. It stood for a few seconds, glaring at him, and then it took off on 4 legs and ran into the woods. The police came later. They found large paw prints, which they attributed to a large dog, but did not find any trace of people. Paul said that his aunt and uncle did have neighbors, but they were a ways away, like nobody within earshot of the house. And the house had a long driveway that you had to drive down in order to make it to the house. Paul continued taking care of the animals and watching the house until his aunt and uncle returned. But he didn't sleep there. He stayed at his parents' house after taking care of the animals. He did have his ex-girlfriend, the girl he was dating at the time, reach out to me to verify his story and ask her any questions if needed. They're not together anymore, but they're still friends. And she doesn't live in the area anymore, but she says she fully believes after that night that there are werewolves living in those woods, or at least one werewolf. She also told me that there is a famous story about a werewolf in London, Ohio, but that most people in the area just think that it's just folklore. Paul also said I could use his real name, so if you see a Paul in the comments, that's him, and feel free to ask either him or Cody any questions. And keep sending me your spooky, scary stories. I guess I'll do more cryptids because they're fun. Also, if you follow me from this video and you get an immediate request and message from me, it's not me. A lot of people have been using my profile picture to try to scam people out of money, so just be careful. I love you. Stay spooky.